What's it really like being a landlord? Is it as stressful as you think? Is there vacancy to contend with, heavy repairs to contend with? We're dealing with 2,000 landlords. We're going to talk about life of a landlord every day. Stay tuned.
I'm the ringleader, so listen up.
Good
Hi.
morning, Mr. Real Estate Man,
Hi, how are you?
passionate real estate agent, passionate, what
Oh,
I like to call an accommodation provider, not a landlord.
well, in Melbourne, you're not allowed to call them a landlord. You're not allowed to call them a tenant. We have to call them a property provider and a property occupier.
Mm,
It's illegal.
property provider, that was the one I was looking for. But yeah, it's a nicer way of saying it. Like at the end of the day, you're providing accommodation for someone to live in. Um, And I reckon this is like, there is a great divide between people that love the idea of that, and then people that just steer away going, I can earn money in the bank with no headache.
Yes. And look, I think if you're not exposed to it, how would you know? I think having a bit of good old fashioned conversation today about what we encounter on a daily basis with our landlords, the highs, the lows. I often talk to people and they get surprised about the lack of the virtually or the lack of vacancy. So properties being quite easy to rent, and I'm talking over a 10 or 20-year period, 30-year period. It's never
Yep.
really a problem to rent properties out. So there's basic things that happen in the life of the landlord that I guess unless you are a landlord, who do you talk to about this and ask about the trials and tribulations? You don't get educated in school on it, formally educated. So yeah, how do you find out these things?
Yeah, that's right. You're pretty much just talking to people and their experiences, and sometimes going into it a little bit in the dark,
Yep.
and learning for yourself. But look, the common pitfalls of being a landlord, I reckon this is the number one that people worry about, is the tenant management side of things, like dealing with tenant issues such as late payments, property damage. They're probably the two biggest ones in people's head.
Well, it's pretty scary that one person can strangle your cash flow. And I think that's quite a daunting process. That if that tenant of your property stops paying rent, how are you going to pay the mortgage?
Yeah, and it's not exactly easy either to get the tenant, moving. If there is, a legitimate reason their work's frozen up or whatever, you can't exactly just move them out straight away. There is a bit of a process to follow. So yeah, I think that's probably the landlord's biggest, concern.
And I think you'd find that that reason number one is why people actually don't buy property. And today we just wanted to sort of clear up. The nice thing is because we are looking after so many landlords and so many tenants of properties, we've got a bit of a metric for you that we wanted to share of what's normal and what's not. And I do have to say, with all the landlords and all the tenants, tenants do meet their commitments. They don't often freeze up and hang the owner out to dry. I would say out of 2,000 properties, we probably would be lucky to see that once or twice in a year. Late
Yeah,
payment, sure. No payment, very rare.
and that's managed pretty well from the property manager's end. That's why you need a good property manager, and we'll come back to whether you should have one or not. But a property manager will monitor those rental payments, and if you set a good posture from the start of the tenancy and an expectation with someone moving in, it often carries through the whole of the lease. But rental arrears, they don't just come on from overnight either. So if they're monitored, and I think the girls, the team upstairs in our office, really pay attention in that first 14 days. It's critical getting onto it early, and pretty much making a payment plan. Like if someone needs a bit of help, just having the conversation. It's never bad to phone into the office and just say, look, I'm going through a bit of a period in between work or something like that. But the worst thing you can do is not communicate.
Big time. What else spooks landlords?
Say again.
What else spooks a landlord?
Let me refer back to my notes. I think the vacancy is another big one. However, on the residential side, the average letting period between putting the property on the market and finding someone is 7 to 14 days in the current market, providing you're using all the realestate.com portals and things like that. It's pretty quick.
So not a thing?
Not really. And like often tenants are giving a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks notice anyway, sometimes a little bit more. So you could always start doing the rental open homes just a little bit earlier, hoping to line someone up on the back of their vacate date. So you reduce that vacancy period. Commercial landlords seem to have a different mindset. You've probably got a little bit more perspective there.
Look, commercial landlord's hard because I think you've got less comparisons to measure up against as a property manager. So when you're comparing those properties to other things are rented, there's just less comparisons out there, so it's a little bit harder. But I do have to say we've worked in the most ferocious rental markets with vacancy. We've worked through GFC, through vacancy. We've worked through COVID with vacancies on rental properties, GFC 1, GFC 2, worked through the recession as well. And I've got to say that the vacancies element side of it, again, not bad, not freaky.
Yeah. Jonathan Craig, good morning to you, sir. Damage is probably, again, right up there on people's worry list. I was having a bit of a look this morning. Anywhere between sort of 1% to 2% of the property value is what you should probably be keeping aside for a bit of a kitty. But let's assume your property is worth 500,000. 5 to 10,000 of that, I reckon, is actually more than enough. Like if you're buying the right kind of asset, and there are assets where you can buy it knowing that you've got to invest and you've got to do repairs, and you're probably saving on your purchase price. But if you buy the right kind of asset, for an example, there's buildings in DY that are only 5 to 10 years old. A lot of them don't need a whole lot doing. The general maintenance of them is very low.
And I do have to say the area that you're buying in will be more conducive to damage or less damage. So if you're buying in a transient area or a rough area and you're renting your property out, there's more chances it could be damage. But I think you'll find like eastern suburbs, North Shore, northern beaches of Sydney, the whole damage thing, like to give you an idea, again, we're managing over 2,000 properties, and again, we don't see much malicious damage, or I'd say see any. You may see an accidental damage, but malicious damage, no.
Well, think about, from an entry-level landlord's perspective, if they've just bought their first apartment, they're probably been worried about, it being trashed. There's only so many people you can fit in a one-bedroom apartment, and the lease going into it is generally a single or a couple. So there's not room for big parties or things like that, what the landlords consider nightmares.
And look, these guys are generally, they're not overnighters like in a hotel room. They're going to be hanging around for a while. We've ID'd them. We've reference checked them. Generally, the quality control of the way the tenant's been put in is good, and it's their home. People generally look after their home. So I think if you're buying an investment property on the northern beaches, there's some really good things there that you don't have to, that we can assure you that you don't have to worry about. And we know that because we're just looking after the amount of properties that we're looking after. So if the things we went over today, Billy, was rent coming in on time. We talked about malicious damage. We talked about vacancy. They're all actually they can really play havoc on your brain as a potential landlord, but I do have to sort of give you that assurance that then they're not really a thing at all.
And the biggest way to prevent any problem going wrong is getting it right from the start. I personally think that starts with a good property manager, because if you try and do that yourself, it's like trying to take on someone's whole profession. You know, there's some of the team members upstairs in the office that have been doing this for 15 years in the same office. Like, that's really rare to have that level of experience. And you know, you can't think that you're going to be able to get it right your first time as a new landlord, rather than employing someone to manage that process for you.
I love that saying that, you know, we're looking after a pot of gold. You're going to give $1 million, which is your asset, to someone, and you're going to ask them to look after it. Furthermore, you're going to ask them that when you come back for the pot of cash, there's more in there. So there's an enormous amount of trust going into your property manager. Make sure you do your research with your property manager that they're great, and 100% they're gonna look after that pot of gold so well, because they're trained. It's like military precision.
Yeah, yeah. And I agree with Jonathan. I think if you buy a particular class of asset, you will attract a particular class of tenant.
I'm going to sell Jonathan a property on the Northern Beaches. I will. Oh yeah, it will happen.
That's it. That's the show.
That's the show. Bottom line is, if you're a landlord, don't freak out. Why? Because we manage a bucket load of properties, and when you look at compared to the amount that we manage compared to the pains that landlords have, it's just minimal.
And your people dealing's people at the end of the day. Don't overthink it.
Leave it to the jury. Have a good day, everyone. Take care. See ya.